The sun was slowly sinking below the horizon, casting long, creeping shadows over the dusty military camp nestled at the edge of a restless war zone. The air was thick with tension, and the quiet hum of distant engines mixed with the murmurs of soldiers, preparing for another grueling night patrol. Everyone was on edge, nerves fraying with every passing minute. Some whispered about the new woman recently assigned to their unit, the one who kept to herself, moving like a shadow through the camp. Nobody really knew much about her except that she was quiet, seemed cold, and did not talk much. They said she was a liability, that she didn't belong here, that her presence would bring trouble. But no one saw what was behind those calm eyes. What secrets they held, or the storms that raged beneath her composed exterior. As the men checked their weapons and tightened their gear, the new woman stood apart, her gaze fixed on the horizon, where the last rays of sunlight bled into darkness. Her hands moved, with practiced ease adjusting the straps on her vest, double-checking the rifle slung across her back. She wasn't just another soldier. She was a ghost, a force hidden in plain sight, yet many refused to believe that they thought her too fragile to face the dangers lurking beyond the camp walls, too inexperienced to hold her own in the chaos of combat. Her footsteps were silent, almost like a whisper on the cracked earth, and yet the weight she carried was heavier than any armor. Her past missions were classified and shrouded in mystery stories circulated in hushed tones about a sniper who had saved entire squads single-handedly, about a fighter who could vanish into shadows and strike with deadly precision. But the men here dismissed it as legend too good to be true. They didn't see the hours of training, the discipline etched into every fiber of her being, or the sacrifices she had made to be here. They just saw a woman they couldn't trust, a liability waiting to break. When the team gathered for the evening briefing, the atmosphere was thick with skepticism. The squad leader glanced at her with a mix of doubt and pity. He didn't hide his feelings as he outlined the patrol route and the possible threats they might encounter tonight. Was supposed to be routine, a simple sweep through the nearby village to gather intelligence and ensure no hostile activity was brewing. But the tension was palpable, and the men whispered among themselves, casting sideways glances at the newcomer. The woman said nothing, her face unreadable, but inside a storm was gathering. Her mind raced through every possible scenario, calculating risks and outcomes. She knew something was coming, something beyond the usual danger, something that would test every skill she possessed. The night air grew colder as darkness wrapped the camp in its silent embrace. The soldiers checked their weapons one last time, voices low with nervous energy. The woman moved to the edge of the group, her silhouette blending. With the deepening shadows, she felt the weight of eyes watching her, the judgment, the doubt, but she didn't flinch. Instead, she drew in a slow, steadying breath, feeling the familiar surge of adrenaline that came before the fight, before the chaos, before the moments that defined a warrior. Suddenly, a crackle burst through the radio, cutting through the uneasy calm. A voice, strained, urgent, desperate, came through, warning that 9 armed hostiles were moving fast toward the camp. Backup was hours away, and the team had little time to prepare. The camp erupted into motion, men scrambling to defensive positions, shouting orders and checking their gear. The woman didn't hesitate, slipping through the chaos like a ghost, unseen and unheard. She moved with purpose, climbing to a vantage point where she could see the enemy approach like a hawk watching its prey. Her heart beat steady, like a drum in her chest as she waited, the world narrowing to a sharp point of focus. She knew this moment would change everything. The whispers would stop, the doubts would vanish, and the true measure of her strength would be revealed. As the shadows deepened and the first figures of the hostile force emerged from the darkness, she tightened her grip on her rifle, ready to become the unseen force that would turn the tide of battle. The night was about to erupt into fire and fury, and she was the calm in the storm, the unexpected warrior nobody saw coming. She stood alone high above the restless camp, her breath steady, her eyes sharp and unblinking beneath the darkening sky. The voices of her teammates echoed faintly below, filled with doubt and fear. They still whispered behind closed lips, calling her reliability, questioning how she could possibly stand against the coming storm. But she paid them no mind. Her training had taught her to block out distractions, to focus only on the mission, on survival and victory. Every moment since she had arrived here had been a test, a silent battle to prove she belonged to this unforgiving world. She had been forged in the crucible of conflict, learned to read the subtle shifts in enemy movements, to anticipate danger before it arrived. The rumors whispered about her were true, but no one here had seen the full extent of her skill. Not yet. They only knew her as the quiet one, the outsider who didn't speak much and kept to the shadows. Yet beneath that calm exterior was a fierce determination. Tempered by experience and a deep well of courage, she had bled and fought for every inch of her place among these hardened soldiers. The sun dipped lower, bleeding orange and red streaks across the sky, signaling the approach of night, and with it, the enemy. Her fingers tightened around the cold metal of her rifle, running through a practiced sequence of checks and adjustments. The rifle was more than a weapon to her. It was an extension of her will, a tool of precision and power. She had trained with it for years, mastering every nuance, every angle and shot. The distance, the wind, the faintest whisper of movement were all data points she processed instinctively as she prepared for the fight ahead. Below her, the camp was a frenzy of movement. As her team scrambled to ready defenses, their shouts and hurried footsteps reached her ears, but did not shake her focus. She was alone in this moment, but not afraid. Her mind sharpened like a blade honed by countless missions and near misses. The enemy was closing fast. 9 armed men moving with deadly intent, closing in under cover of darkness. They had no idea what waited for them, perched in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Every breath she took was measured, every heartbeat syncing with the rhythm of the night. Around her, the world seemed to hold its breath. The only sounds, the rustle of dry leaves and the distant call of a night bird. Then the first silhouettes appeared, breaking through the tree line like ghosts emerging from the mist. Her finger eased onto the trigger, eyes narrowing as she tracked the lead hostile. Their faces were hard with resolve, but none suspected a single woman was waiting silently above, ready to unleash a storm. The first shot rang out, breaking the silence like thunder. Her bullet struck true, and the man collapsed before the others even knew what happened. Confusion rippled through the hostile ranks like a sudden cold wind. They hesitated, reeled by the unexpected. Attack trying to regroup, but she was relentless. Each shot was precise, each breath controlled. She moved with fluid grace, shifting her position, firing from cover to cover, never exposing herself fully. The hostiles struggled to find her, their movements frantic and disorganized. Her presence was a shadow, an invisible force, dismantling their advance with terrifying efficiency. The team below caught glimpses of her deadly work, and disbelief spread among them. They had mocked her, doubted her, but now she was the line holding them steady in the storm. Their eyes widened in shock and growing respect as she dismantled the enemy one by one, turning the tide with every shot. She was no longer a liability, but a force of nature, a lone sentinel whose resolve and skill defied their expectations. The night air was thick with tension as the firefight escalated. The enemy tried to flank and overwhelm, but she anticipated their moves, slipping through smoke and shadows, striking at the heart of their assault with cold, ruthless precision. Her bare hands were as lethal as her rifle, disarming and incapacitating foes who got too close. Every second she bought was precious time for the team to regroup and prepare for the backup that was still painfully far away. The battle raged beneath the stars, but high above the camp, she was a silent guardian, an unseen warrior whose courage and determination would be remembered long after the night had ended. The night air was thick with tension as the sounds of gunfire echoed across the camp. Each crack of a rifle shot tore through the silence and sent ripples of fear and adrenaline coursing through the soldiers below. They moved with a frantic urgency, scrambling to hold their ground, but the enemy was relentless. 9 hostile fighters pressed in hard, fueled by desperation and deadly intent. The woman perched high on the ridge watched everything unfolding with cold calculation, her breathing steady, her mind sharp as she tracked every movement, every shift in the battle below. They had doubted her strength, called her a liability, yet now she was the unseen force holding the line between survival and destruction. Her finger rested lightly on the trigger, scanning for the perfect shot. The hostiles advanced in loose formation, moving fast, trying to close the distance, but each step they took was met with precise resistance. A flash of movement, a crack of a rifle, and another enemy fell. Her shots were like whispers of death, silent, deadly, and impossible to predict. Below her, the team was struggling to regroup their initial shock, fading into fierce determination. They had witnessed her skill now. Their doubts were replaced by awe, and an urgent hope that she could hold the line long enough for reinforcements to arrive. The hostile fighters began to scatter, trying to find cover and reorganize, but the woman was relentless. Each of her moves was calculated, a deadly dance choreographed. By years of training and experience, she shifted positions smoothly, disappearing into the shadows only to reappear with lethal accuracy, taking down targets who thought they had gained the advantage. The firelight flickered across her face, revealing nothing but fierce resolve. The air was thick with smoke and dust, mingling with the distant cries of wounded men and the harsh orders barked by commanders. But she remained focused, unbroken, a calm eye in the storm. The enemy tried flanking maneuvers, desperate and reckless, but she anticipated every move, slipping through cover with ghost-like silence, disarming and disabling foes with hands as deadly as her bullets. Every second she bought for her team was a small victory, a chance to breathe, to regroup, and to fight. Another day, the soldiers on the ground caught glimpses of her shadowy figure moving through the darkness like a phantom. Their respect grew with each passing moment as they realized that this woman they had once doubted was now their greatest asset. The night dragged on with the battle ebbing and flowing like a savage tide. Her endurance was tested, her body pushed to the limits, but she did not falter. Not once did she allow fear or fatigue to cloud her judgment. Each decision was sharp, precise, guided by a fierce will to survive and protect. The hostiles grew desperate, their ranks thinning, their movements becoming erratic, but still, she pressed forward, a relentless force striking with deadly intent. One by one, the enemy fighters fell under her relentless assault, until finally the last hostile crumpled to the ground, the battlefield falling eerily silent except for the labored breaths of the survivors. The woman stood alone amidst the fading chaos, her eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of more threats, but there was only silence. The backup was still hours away, and the camp was battered, bruised, but still standing. Her teammates gathered around her, their faces a mix of exhaustion and newfound respect. They no longer saw a liability, but a warrior whose courage and skill had saved them all. The night had tested her in ways no training could prepare for, and she had emerged victorious, a silent guardian whose story would be told again and again across the bases and beyond. The shadows lengthened as dawn approached, and with it a promise of hope and renewal. The woman lowered her rifle, finally allowing herself a moment to breathe. The battle was won, but the war was far from over, and she knew this was only the beginning of her true legacy. She moved through the camp like a shadow, blending with the darkness around her, every step silent and deliberate. The adrenaline still thrummed through her veins, the sharp taste of victory lingering, but the fight was far from over. The men and women she had fought alongside were gathering their strength, tending to wounds and reinforcing defenses, but her mind was already racing ahead, planning the next moves. The battlefield was a mess of scattered debris, spent shells, and the faint, acrid scent of smoke. But her eyes remained clear, scanning for any sign of new threats or ambushes. The sun had long disappeared beneath the horizon, leaving only the pale glow of stars to light the night. She felt the weight of exhaustion pressing down, but she refused to let it slow her. Not now. Not when so much depended on her strength. Her teammates who had once doubted her were now looking at her with wide eyes and silent gratitude. They whispered amongst themselves stories of how she had stood, alone against 9 hostiles, taking them down with an almost supernatural precision and calm. The camp commander approached her, his face grave but tinged with respect. He nodded in acknowledgement. The woman who was once a liability had become their greatest asset, a shield between them and death. Yet even as the praise washed over her, she remained guarded, knowing the enemy was cunning, and the battle only momentarily paused. Her mind replayed every detail of the fight the way the hostiles had. Moved their patterns, the gaps in their formation. Every piece of information was a thread in the web she was weaving to prepare for what was next. She walked to the command tent where maps and radios crackled with static. The commander briefed her on reinforcements, their estimated arrival hours away, and the need to hold the camp until then. She agreed silently, understanding the gravity of the situation. There was no room for error, no second chances. As night deepened, a cold wind swept across, the camp stirring dust and leaves. The woman took a moment to herself, stepping away from the bustle, finding a quiet spot beneath a gnarled tree. The weight of her past and present pressed on her shoulders, but in the stillness, she found a brief moment of peace. She thought of the men and women she had lost in other fights, the sacrifices made in silence, the lives changed forever. Her mission was bigger than herself, bigger than any single battle. It was about survival, honor, and proving to a world that underestimated her that she was a force to be reckoned with. The distant sound of footsteps brought her back to the present. Her team was rallying around her, drawing strength from her resilience. She felt a surge of determination fueling her tired muscles. The night was far from over, and the enemy could return at any moment. She checked her rifle once more, fingers deft and sure. The weapon was a lifeline, a companion through countless battles, and it would not fail her now. She climbed back to her vantage point, scanning the horizon with hawk-like focus. The stars twinkled cold and distant, but her eyes burned with fierce resolve. Below her, the camp was alive with quiet urgency. The soldiers fortified positions, set traps, and shared whispered plans. Every second counted, every breath was a battle against time. The woman was no longer the outsider, but the heart of their defense, a beacon of strength and skill in the darkness. The memory of the 9 hostiles and how she had stopped them burned in her mind, a reminder of the stakes and the cost of failure. She steeled herself, preparing for whatever came next. The night stretched on a living thing full of danger and possibility, and she was ready to face it all alone, if she had to, because she was no liability but a warrior who had proven her worth in the fires of battle. The night grew colder as shadows deepened around the camp, and the distant sounds of movement stirred her senses. The woman remained perched on her high vantage point, eyes scanning every inch of the dark horizon. Her rifle rested ready in her hands, a familiar weight that grounded her amidst the chaos. The adrenaline of the earlier fight still coursed through her veins, sharpening her instincts. Every twitch of the leaves, every distant footstep was amplified in her mind. The quiet was deceptive. A fragile veil stretched thin over the threat lurking just beyond sight. She had learned to trust these moments, the silence before the storm, where danger loomed like a predator waiting to strike. Her teammates below busied themselves fortifying, defenses setting traps and patching wounds. Their whispered conversations carried hope and fear mingled together as they awaited backup, which was still far away. But the woman felt no hesitation, no doubt. Only a cold, burning certainty that she was the shield between her team and destruction. She adjusted her grip on the rifle fingers steady, despite the weight of exhaustion pressing on her limbs. Suddenly, a flicker of movement caught her eye just beyond the tree line. A shadow slipping through the darkness. She held her breath, muscles tensing like a coiled spring. The enemy was not finished. 9 hostiles were regrouping, more cunning, more desperate, ready to launch another assault. This time, she would be ready. The first figure stepped into the faint moonlight, and she squeezed the trigger. Her shot was lightning quick, striking true and dropping the man before he could raise alarm, but there was no time to celebrate. Another rushed forward, desperate to avenge his fallen comrade. She shifted her position, slipping into deeper cover, firing from the shadows. Each shot was a deadly whisper, silencing threats before they could fully materialize. Her movements were fluid, silent, like water flowing around rocks. She was everywhere and nowhere, a ghost striking with precision and grace. The hostiles faltered, unable to pinpoint her location. Their confusion grew into panic as she dismantled their advance piece by piece. She could hear the frantic calls of their leader trying to rally his men. But the fear was spreading like wildfire. She was turning the tide again with every breath, every heartbeat. The soldiers below caught glimpses of her shadowy figure darting between trees and rocks. Their awe turned to fierce determination, inspired by her bravery and skill. The camp was no longer just a place to defend, but a symbol of resilience forged by one woman standing tall against overwhelming odds. The night stretched endlessly, but she did not waver. Her senses honed her focus, unbreakable. She anticipated every move, every strategy the enemy threw at her, slipping through their ranks, disarming and incapacitating foes who dared come close. Her hands moved with deadly efficiency, turning the tide in ways bullets alone could. Not each close encounter was a battle of wills, a test of strength and resolve. She fought not just with weapons, but with everything she had learned in years of training and hardship. The enemy grew weaker, their numbers thinning their attacks, desperate and erratic. But she pressed on, relentless, a force of nature that would not be stopped. With every fallen hostile, the camp breathed a little easier. Hope blossomed in the cold night air. But she knew this was far from over. The final challenge was yet to come, and she would face it alone if she had to. As dawn hinted on the horizon, her rifle clicked empty, and she dropped the spent magazine, swapping in a fresh one without hesitation. Her body screamed for rest, but her mind was steel-focused, unyielding. The sun would rise on a battlefield held by courage and grit. The woman who had been underestimated was no longer a shadow. She was a storm, a warrior whose legend was only just beginning. The night was deep, and the air thick with tension as the woman moved silently through the darkness. Her breath steady despite the pounding of her heart. Every muscle in her body was coiled, ready to spring. She had become the unseen guardian, the silent force holding the fragile line between her team and annihilation. The camp lay below her, a cluster of lights flickering like distant stars, but her focus was beyond the glow, beyond the safety of the makeshift walls. The enemy was still out, there regrouping, licking their wounds, and plotting their next move. 9 hostiles had come with lethal intent, but she had dismantled them one by one. Now the real test was survival. her fingers wrapped tightly around the grip of her rifle, the cold, metal familiar, comforting in the chaos. Around her, the night whispered secrets, the rustle of leaves, the crack of twigs underfoot, the distant cry of a lone animal. Each sound was a clue, a warning to be read and understood. She slipped through shadows, moving like a phantom, blending seamlessly with the darkness. She was not just a shooter, but a hunter, a warrior trained to strike and vanish before the enemy even knew she was there. The hostiles, desperate and reckless, now tried to flank the camp, their movements erratic, betraying fear and frustration, but she anticipated their every step. Like a ghost, she followed their trails silent and unseen, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. When they broke cover, she struck with brutal efficiency, disabling two before they could react. Her hands were as lethal as her rifle, disarming and incapacitating foes with a skill born from years of grueling combat training. Each close encounter was a dance of survival, every movement precise, every strike decisive. The men and women in the camp watched with a mix of fear and admiration, their respect for her growing with every success. She was no longer the outsider, but the heart of their defense, the force keeping death at bay. The battle wore on. With fierce intensity, the night a battlefield of shadows and whispered gunfire. Exhaustion clawed at her body, but she pushed it aside, ignoring the ache in her muscles and the sting of old wounds. Her mind was a steel trap, focused sharp and unyielding. The hostiles were thinning their ranks, dwindling with each calculated strike, but they fought with desperation, fueled by the need to survive. She knew she had to end this quickly before more could arrive, before her team was overwhelmed. She moved to intercept a small group attempting to sneak around the perimeter. Her rifle cracked, and two fell before the others could even raise their weapons. She closed the distance, her bare hands swift and merciless, incapacitating another with a quick, precise strike. The final enemy turned to flee, but she was faster, closing in with relentless pursuit. Her grip was iron cold as she subdued him, ending the threat with brutal efficiency. The battlefield fell silent save for the ragged breaths of those still standing. The camp held its breath, waiting for the dawn, waiting for the moment when relief would come. The woman stood alone, her silhouette stark against the faint glow of approaching morning. She was battered, bruised, but unbroken, a living testament to courage and skill. The soldiers gathered around her, their faces a mix of awe, exhaustion, and gratitude. They had once doubted her, but now she was their shield, their protector, the warrior who had stopped 9 hostiles before backup arrived. Her story would be told in hushed tones around campfires in barracks and whispered in the corridors of command. She was a legend born of fire and shadow, a reminder that true strength often hides where least expected. The sun finally broke over the horizon, casting light on a battlefield held by one woman who refused to be underestimated. The camp was alive with murmurs and cautious movements as dawn began to bleed into the dark sky. The first rays of sunlight touched the rough tents and worn faces of the soldiers who had survived the brutal night. The woman who had stood alone against 9 hostiles now moved slowly through the camp, her body aching and her breath steady, but her mind racing with the weight of what had transpired. Around her, the men and women whispered stories of her courage, the quiet one who had shattered every doubt with unwavering precision and unyielding will. Their eyes followed her as she passed, a living symbol of resilience and strength. The commanders gathered in the tent, their faces lined with fatigue and respect. The woman was summoned, too, the center where maps and radios lay strewn in chaotic order. She listened intently as plans were laid for the next phase of the mission. Reinforcements were still hours away, and the enemy was likely to strike again. The pressure mounted, but she was resolute, a pillar of calm amid the rising storm. Her thoughts drifted back to the moments before the battle had erupted. The feeling of isolation, the sneers and whispered judgments that had once marked her as a liability. The sting of those words fueled a fire inside her, a fire that had burned through the night and into the hearts of those who witnessed her fight. She recalled the steady beat of her own breathing, the rhythm that kept her grounded when chaos threatened to swallow her whole. The memories of each shot fired, each enemy subdued, played like a silent movie behind her eyes, every detail etched into her mind, a testament to her strength and survival. The soldiers who had doubted her now looked to her for guidance, their respect earned through blood and grit. The camp was no longer a place of suspicion, but of unity forged in the heat of combat. The woman took a moment to herself, stepping away from the bustle, finding solace beneath a twisted tree whose branches reached like fingers toward the sky. She closed her eyes, drawing in the cool morning air, feeling the weight of exhaustion press against her bones. Yet within that weariness was a deep well of determination, a promise that she would never be underestimated. Again, the battle had revealed her true self, not just a soldier, but a warrior, shaped by hardship and unshakable resolve. Her hands absent-mindedly brushed the scars on her arms, reminders of past fights, battles both seen and unseen. She thought of the comrades she had lost, the sacrifices made in silence, the debts owed to honor and courage. The world beyond the camp was still dangerous, unpredictable, but she was ready for whatever came next. The murmurs in the camp grew louder as soldiers shared their tales of the night, the moment when she stood alone against overwhelming odds and emerged victorious. Her legend was spreading faster than wildfire, fueling hope and inspiring others to believe in the strength of the underestimated. The woman straightened her posture, her eyes scanning the horizon for signs of new threats, but also for the first hints of relief. The backup was coming, and with it a chance to hold the line and push back against the darkness that threatened their world. She returned to the command tent, where the leaders awaited her input. Strategies were discussed, orders given, and plans adjusted. Her voice was calm, confident, carrying the weight of experience and the quiet authority earned through fire. She was no longer the quiet outsider, but the heart of the team, a beacon of courage in the darkest hours. The sun climbed higher, casting golden light over the battered camp, illuminating faces marked by fatigue and determination. The woman stood tall, a living testament to the power of resilience and the unyielding spirit of a warrior who refused to be underestimated. Her story was far from over, but this chapter had been written in the blood and sweat of a night that would never be forgotten. The camp was ready to face whatever came next, united and stronger because of one woman who had stopped 9 hostiles before backup arrived. The day was breaking over the rugged landscape, casting long shadows across the battered camp. The first light revealed scars of the night before. Broken branches scorched earth and the remnants of a fierce battle. Yet amidst the wreckage, the spirit of the soldiers burned brighter than ever. The woman who had stood sentinel through the darkness now moved with quiet purpose, her step sure and deliberate as she checked equipment and rallied the weary troops. The memory of the fight was fresh. In every eye, the way she had faced 9 hostiles alone with nothing but her skill and willpower. Her presence had shifted something fundamental, turning doubt into respect and fear into determination. She paused by a makeshift memorial where names were etched in metal, honoring those lost in the ongoing conflict. A hand brushed lightly over the cold surface, a silent vow to carry on their fight, to protect and endure. The camp commander approached, nodding with grave approval. His eyes met hers, conveying unspoken gratitude and trust. Together, they reviewed maps and intelligence reports, planning the next movements against an enemy that was cunning and relentless, But the woman was no longer just a soldier following orders. She had become a strategist, a leader whose insight was valued beyond her years. Her mind raced through possibilities, assessing threats and opportunities. The terrain, the weather, the morale of her team, every factor a piece in the intricate puzzle of survival. As the sun climbed higher, the camp buzzed with renewed energy. Soldiers shared stories of the night, their voices low but filled with awe. The tale of the woman who had stopped 9 hostiles spread quickly, becoming legend, whispered in mess halls and passed along like a sacred chant. It was a story not just of skill, but of heart, of the strength that comes from being underestimated and rising anyway. The woman found herself surrounded by questions and congratulations, but she remained humble, aware that every victory carried the weight of sacrifice. She thought of the faces of those who had fought beside her, the camaraderie forged in fire and fear, the bond between warriors unspoken but unbreakable. In a quiet moment, she stepped away from the crowd, seeking solace beneath a sky stretching wide and endless. The wind carried the scent of earth and pine, the promise of new battles and the hope of peace. She closed her eyes, breathing deeply, feeling the pulse of the world around her. The camp was safe for now, but the war was far from over, and she knew the coming days would demand even more courage and resolve. From the shadows of doubt, she had emerged into the light, a warrior whose name would be spoken with reverence and respect. The night when she stopped 9 hostiles alone was etched into the history of the fight, a testament to what one person could do when pushed to the edge and refused to break. The soldiers looked to her now, not just as a protector, but as a symbol of endurance and hope. Their spirits lifted by her example, ready to face whatever darkness lay ahead. The woman straightened her shoulders and met their gaze, her eyes burning with fierce determination. The road ahead was uncertain and fraught with danger. But together they would stand unyielding, united by the strength of one who refused to be underestimated. The sun cast long beams of light over the camp, illuminating scars and stories alike, and she was ready to write the next chapter in the saga of survival and courage. The camp was slowly waking under the pale morning light as soldiers moved with purposeful energy, patching wounds, sharpening weapons, and readying for what lay ahead. The night had left its mark deep in the dust and the hearts of those who survived, but hope stirred anew with the rising sun. The woman who had stood as a silent sentinel throughout the darkness now walked among her comrades, a quiet force whose presence brought calm and strength. Her eyes scanned the horizon, alert for any sign of danger. Yet her mind was filled with memories of the battle, the rapid fire, the sharp crack of rifles, and the steady beat of her own pulse matching the rhythm of survival. Each step was a reminder of the price paid and the lives spared by her unyielding resolve. The soldiers gathered close, sharing tales of her bravery the night she had faced 9 hostiles alone and emerged victorious. Their voices were filled with reverence and disbelief. Stories passed from mouth to mouth, weaving a tapestry of legend that grew with every telling. Yet despite the accolades, she remained humble, knowing that the fight was far from over. The commander approached with a solemn expression, his eyes meeting hers with a mixture of gratitude and concern. The reinforcements had finally arrived, but intelligence warned of more enemy movements deeper in the region. The war was relentless, unforgiving, and full of shadows that lurked just beyond sight. The woman listened intently to the briefings, her mind already racing through strategies and contingencies. She understood the weight of leadership not in rank, but in action, and the burden of decisions that meant life or death. The camp was a hive of activity as preparations began for the next operation. Every soldier knew the stakes were high and the margin for error razor thin. The woman moved among them, offering quiet encouragement, sharing a look, a nod, a word that spoke volumes. Her presence was a beacon of hope in the cold uncertainty of war. As the sun climbed higher, the camp settled into a tense rhythm, the brief respite a fragile bubble in a sea of chaos. She found a moment to herself, stepping away to the edge of the camp where the land stretched wide and open beneath the vast sky. The wind whispered through the grasses, carrying the scent of earth and distant rain. She closed her eyes, breathing deeply, drawing strength from the world around her. The memories of the night played again in her mind, the way she had been, underestimated the surprise on the faces of the hostiles, the steady calm that had carried her through. The scars she bore were not just physical, but marks of experience and resilience, proof that true strength often lay hidden beneath quiet exteriors. The soldiers returned to their tasks renewed and ready to face the challenges ahead. Their respect for the woman had transformed into loyalty and trust, a bond forged in the crucible of battle. The camp was no longer just a place of survival, but a fortress of hope built on the courage of those who refused to yield. As the day stretched on, the woman prepared herself for the next mission, knowing that the road ahead would test her again, but confident in the strength she had found and the allies by her side. The legend of the night when she stopped 9 hostiles alone would live on, a reminder that in the darkest moments, the light of one determined soul could shine brightest. The horizon was wide and waiting, and she was ready to meet it head-on with steady hands and an unbreakable spirit. The sun began its slow climb, casting warm golden hues across the battered camp, where the echoes of the previous night still lingered like ghosts in the air. The woman stood at the center, surrounded by her comrades, faces etched with exhaustion and respect. Their eyes held a new light, a recognition born not just of survival, but of witnessing something extraordinary. The battle had changed everything, not just for the team, but for her. For years she had carried the weight of doubt, the sneers of those who saw weakness where there was strength. Now that doubt was shattered, replaced by a quiet reverence that settled deep within the camp, like a fire igniting hope. The stories of how she had stopped 9 hostiles alone spread quickly, weaving their way through the ranks like a sacred chant, inspiring others to rise above their fears and limitations. Her name was spoken with pride, whispered in the halls and shouted across training grounds, a symbol of courage born from hardship and unyielding. Will she moved among the soldiers now? No longer the outsider, but a leader. A warrior who had earned her place, not through words, but through action. The scars on her skin told a tale of battles fought and survived, each one a mark of resilience and sacrifice. But it was her eyes that told the truest story, sharp and steady, reflecting the soul of someone who had seen darkness and refused to be consumed by it. The commanders gathered around her, seeking counsel, their faces lined with fatigue, but lit with hope. They knew the fight was far from over, but with her strength and insight, they felt prepared to face whatever came next. Her mind raced through plans, strategies, contingencies, each detail weighed and measured with the precision of a seasoned tactician. She understood the delicate balance between caution and boldness, the razor edge where victory was claimed or lost. The camp buzzed with renewed energy as soldiers prepared for the next operation, their movements confident, their resolve hardened by the knowledge that they were not alone, that one among them had faced the impossible and emerged victorious. The woman stood at the edge of the camp, watching the horizon where the first light met the earth. The wind whispered, through the grass carrying promises of both danger and hope. She drew a steadying breath, feeling the pulse of the land beneath her feet, the heartbeat of the mission that was far bigger than any one person. As the day unfolded, she knew the path. Ahead would be filled with trials and sacrifice. but she was ready. For the first time in a long while, she felt a deep sense of belonging, a connection forged in fire and blood with those who fought beside her. The legend of the night when she stopped. 9 hostiles before backup arrived was no longer just a story. It was a testament to the power of determination, courage, and the unbreakable spirit of a warrior who refused to be underestimated. The sun rose higher, illuminating the camp bathing. It in light and possibility. The woman tightened her grip on her rifle, a quiet smile touching her lips. She was no longer just surviving. She was thriving, a beacon for those who believed that strength comes in many forms, and true warriors rise from the shadows. The battle was far from over, but with each step she took, she carved a path forward, a legacy written in sweat and steel. The night would be remembered not just for the fight, but for the woman who stood tall when all odds were against her and showed the world what it meant to be truly fearless.